You're listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. Join us as we explore new frontiers in consciousness, science, and evolution. And now here's your host, Karen Curry Parker.
If you've been on a path of spiritual evolution for any period of time, you've probably run across stories about people who have the ability to transcend our material experience and do supernatural things like manifest an apple out of thin air, levitate, or be able to press their hands through hard rock with the greatest of ease. Usually it's a highly ascended master of some sort, like Jesus, who walked on water, for example, or a highly trained yogi who spent years meditating in a cave in Tibet. But ordinary, everyday people can also transcend the expectations of our physical form and the limitations of our so-called reasonable knowledge. There are people who defy the odds and heal themselves from cancer and other terrible diseases. People who are able to change the nature of their lives and transform themselves quickly in renewed, abundant ways. What if achieving the supernatural isn't necessarily about mastering some difficult spiritual mindset? I mean, who can really afford to spend 20 years meditating in a cave? But that becoming supernatural is actually a skill set that involves learning how to harness your innate creative capacity. Dr. Joe Dispenza, in his new book, Becoming Supernatural, shows us exactly how we can transcend the limitations of physical existence and learn to live a quantum life, a life that allows us to create in miraculous ways as part of our everyday experience. We are standing on the leading edge of science, where we're beginning to understand that the esoteric teachings of ancient mystics are actually rooted in patterns and possibilities that can be duplicated and repeated consistently, time and time again. That is, after all, the true definition of science. In other words, we are proving, with our new understandings of quantum physics and neurobiology, that we are truly powerful beyond our belief, and that our bodies are actually hardwired to harness a creative power that allows us to create in supernatural ways each and every day. Hi, and welcome to Quantum Conversations. I'm Karen Curry Parker, and I am excited today to be talking to Dr. Joe Dispenza. Dr. Joe Dispenza is the New York Times bestselling author of the books, You Are the Placebo, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and Evolve Your Brain. Dr. Dispenza draws on cutting-edge research to explore how common people are doing the uncommon in his new book, Becoming Supernatural. In his new book, Becoming Supernatural, he marries some of the most profound scientific information with ancient wisdom to show how anyone can experience a more meaningful and mystical life. Becoming supernatural isn't a mutation like you see in the movies or a special gift that only a few of us are born with. What Dr. Joe Dispenza shows is that becoming supernatural which in his, the definition that I like to use around this is being able to dramatically increase your creative abilities, being able to tune into frequencies of energies beyond our material world, being able to receive more orderly, coherent streams of consciousness and energy, and to be able to intentionally change your brain chemistry. And I'm going to guess we're going to talk a little bit about also your telomeres, so that we can deepen our own experience of feeling profoundly connected to Source and the essence of who we truly are. With enough training and practice, Dr. Joe Dispenza says, and his research shows, you can learn to use your supernatural powers to create more efficient, balanced, healthy body, a more unlimited mind, and greater access to realms of spiritual truth, and maybe even live a longer, more meaningful life. Welcome, Dr. Joe. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Karen. Pleasure to be with you.
So I'm excited about this book because it's kind of different than some of the other stuff that you've done. So talk to me a little bit about why you wrote this book.
Well, in the last 5 years, I've been doing extensive research with a team of scientists on our student body, our community. And, I think most people rely on something outside of them to change their internal state, whether it's a drug, a television show, something to make them feel better inside of them. And what we wanted to show is that we have resources within us, that we don't have to rely on something outside of us, that we can change our internal states independent of the conditions in our external environment. And so what that means then is that as our biology begins to change, we start to have subjective experiences, personal experiences. But if we could measure those subjective experiences objectively with brain scans and quantitative heart rate variability and genetic changes and neurotransmitters and telomeres and energy, I think what it shows people is that they have within their reach all of the tools to begin to make necessary changes in their life. And so I took a chance when I wrote this book, because my other books are based on a lot of scientific data. And this book is based on the scientific data that we have done, the research that we have done, and some of the measurements that we've gotten, Karen, just in the last couple of years. If you were to ask me 5 years ago when I started this journey that we would be seeing some of these measurements, I would say absolutely not. And these type of changes are starting to become patterns. We're starting to see the same type of changes, same type of quantitative changes in many, many people. Now, when it happens once, it's an incident. When it happens twice, it's a coincidence. When it starts happening 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 10 times, now you're looking at a trend, and anything that's repeatable is science. So I wanted to show people, not only are people healing their bodies and creating better lives and new opportunities, new careers, new jobs, but also they have access to a realm of information where they can have a mystical experience that will change them forever. And there are latent biological systems that can become activated to have that process happen.
Okay, so I want us to get really grounded with this, because I want you to help people understand how can they tap into this in the most effective, easy way possible. We've done a lot of work in the last, I would say, 15, 20 years in the collective consciousness, even with, the movie The Secret and this whole idea of I create my own reality. What you're really saying, and what I think your book shows so beautifully, is yes, we do indeed create our own reality, but how do we control it, and how does it affect us, not just, with our minds, but how is this affecting our bodies and our creative capacity?
Well, look, this is a bottle of wine and 2-hour conversation, but to make it simple, think about this. We live in a realm of three-dimensional reality, and we experience 3 dimensions with our senses. Everything has height and depth and width, and its objects and its bodies and its people and its things and its places, and that defines our external reality. But according to the quantum model of reality, 3-dimensional reality is not just matter. It's matter and energy. It's particle and wave. And so it begs the question, how much of your daily life in your waking state do you put your attention on information and energy, and how much do you put it on matter? So then the quantum realm is an immaterial realm of energy and frequency that carries information that exists beyond 3-dimensional reality, that you cannot experience with your senses, that you can only experience with your awareness. So then, as an example, you have a nose, and it always exists, but most of the time, if you don't pay attention to it, it doesn't exist for you. But the moment you put your awareness on it, then it exists. Well, the quantum field is exactly like that. If you don't put your attention on it and you don't become aware of it, then it doesn't exist for you. So now, most people, 70% of the time, are living by the hormones of stress. And stress is when you're knocked out of homeostasis, or when your brain and body are aroused and knocked out of balance because of some threat or danger in your outer world. When that occurs, it turns on a primitive nervous system called the fight or flight nervous system, and we begin to mobilize enormous amounts of energy for some threat in your external environment. Now, if you're being chased by a predator, that's very adaptive. But if the predator all of a sudden becomes a coworker or a relative, and you're exposed to that person every single day, what was once adaptive becomes very maladaptive, because the very hormones of stress cause us to narrow our focus on matter. And the more we focus on matter, the more we experience separation. So there's me here and there's you there. And there's time and space between us. There's me here, and then there's my dreams and my future that is separate from me somewhere out there. So the more we live intoxicated by the hormones of stress, the more we believe that we're matter. And the more we believe we're matter, then when we're matter trying to change matter, now we have to play by the laws of Newtonian physics, which means it's going to take time for things to appear in your life. So most people spend the majority of their life becoming a somebody, a someone, owning something, living somewhere, and of course preoccupied with some time. Our research shows that the moment a person takes their attention off their body, off the people in their life, off the things they own, off the places they need to go in time itself, when they go from a somebody to a nobody, from a something to a nothing, from a someone to a no one, from somewhere to nowhere, from some time to no time, is the moment they fall into the eternal present moment. That's the moment they become pure consciousness. They're on the bridge now, the nexus of the quantum, beginning to get beyond themselves. And we call that getting beyond themselves. Now, as they begin to get beyond themselves or forget about themselves, they're entering a realm of energy and information. Now, when they begin to create from this place in the present moment, according to the quantum model of reality, there are infinite potentials that exist. So then the challenge is getting people to get beyond their identity that's connected to their body, their pain, their emotions, their habits, to the people in their life, the things they own, places, and time. And that's the eye of the needle that we have to pass through. Turns out you can teach that. It turns out you can measure that. It turns out you can make it a skill. It turns out you can get better at doing it the more you practice.
Cool. And how, empowering is this information for us to be able to tell a different story of who we really are, a story that actually transcends the story we're maybe living, so that we can rewrite and live a different story than the one that maybe is keeping us locked down in a very Newtonian perspective.
That's a great question. Let me just respond to that quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, most people's narratives are based on their past experience. Why? Because experience creates circuitry in the brain, and experience produces emotion. So the moment a person wakes up in the morning and starts thinking about their problems, and those problems are connected to certain people and things at certain times and places, they're activating circuits in their brain that are from the past. The moment those circuits are firing and they start feeling unhappy or discouraged or frustrated, now their brain and body are both in the past. Now, how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So most people's entire state of being is in the past when they start their day. So then if their entire state of being is in the past, then their future is going to look a lot like their past, and they're going to be predictable in their life. Now, the research on memory, the latest research on memory, says that 50% of what you talk about in your past isn't even the truth, that you make stuff up because memory is creative. You don't have the same brain that you had at the time of that incident. So that means that people are reliving a life that they never even have. So they're telling a story of their past to create some emotion to reaffirm their personality that's connected to the past. So my work is about stop telling the story of your past and start telling the story of your future. Stop believing in your past and start believing in your future. Stop falling in love with your past and start falling in love with a new future. And it's so much easier to lose your vision than to keep it, because so much of our biology is in the past. But when people start making those strides, wow, you start to see very significant changes, not only in their levels of well-being or their levels of joy or their levels of freedom, but also they start to see shifts that start to take place, synchronicities, opportunities, serendipities, coincidences that begin to show up in their life. And the moment they see those incidences of feedback in their outer world, they begin to pay attention to what they did to create it. And now they move from being a victim in their life, saying it's someone or something that's making me feel this way, to all of a sudden becoming a creator of their life, realizing that they're producing some effect in their life.
Wow. So I just read a new study that came out a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't read any scientific, and it was deep studies. It was probably something on Huffington Post. But one of the things this study said was that scientists can now show that certain epigenetic tendencies or traits or programming is actually now carried on for more than 14 generations. Can you tell us a little bit about that in the context of the work that you do? Because I'm imagining that some of the stories we have are stories that maybe even didn't come from this lifetime at all, that is part of our epigenetic legacy. Can you reprogram that epigenetic coding when you do this work?
Okay, so the answer is yes, because we've measured it. But let's back up so that people understand what that means. Most people think that they're doomed by their genes, that they're hardwired to be a certain way for the rest of their lives. In fact, we are marvels of adaptability and change. But if you're thinking the same thoughts that lead to the same choices, that create the same behaviors, that produce the same experiences to reinforce the same emotions, and then those same emotions begin to influence your thoughts, well, then your biology, your neurocircuitry, your neurochemistry, your hormones, and even your genes will stay the same because there's no new information coming from your environment. But it begs the question, what if new thoughts lead to new choices, which lead to new behaviors that create new experiences that produce new emotions? Will you begin to see changes in neurocircuitry, neurochemistry? You begin to see changes in hormones and even genetic expression? And the answer is absolutely yes. That in fact, genes are like Christmas tree lights. They turn on and off all the time. When they turn on, they upregulate and they make a protein. When they begin to downregulate or turn off, they stop making a healthy protein. So then proteins are responsible for the structure and function of your body. The expression of proteins is the expression of life. And in order for a cell to make a protein, a gene has to be regulated. So then there are genes called experience-dependent genes and behavior-dependent genes that are passed on to the very next generation. So then if you have certain behaviors that are hardwired that you haven't changed, and you got those genetically from your parents, and then the environment in which you grew up in was your observation through mirror neurons caused you to emulate and begin to demonstrate the same behaviors and make the same choices as your parents. Well, now, for the most part, more than likely, you're headed for a genetic destiny because most of those programs are happening on a subconscious level. You're not conscious of them, and 95% of who we are by the time we're 35 years old is a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, hardwired attitudes that function just like a computer program. So then it's not enough to just think positively, because you could think positively with the 5% of your conscious mind and you could have mastered negativity or unhappiness, and no thought is going to pass your brainstem to make it to your body. So there has to be a way that people start to understand that they have to get into the operating system. So we took a group of people. We randomly selected 35 people in a study. 5 days, measured their gene expression, 7,500 different genes. We put them through 4 days of intense training, meditation, having them think differently, having them make different choices, do different things, create new experiences, feel new emotions, walk as it, stand as it, sit as it, lie down as it. And at the end of 4 days, we found out that there were 8 common genes that were upregulated in these individuals. Now, they were randomly selected, so we had no idea who they were. And all of a sudden, we started to see the gene that actually suppresses cancer growth in tumors was upregulated. The gene for neurogenesis, not just making new connections, but growing new neurons in response to novel experiences and learning new information. The gene that, for oxidative stress, was upregulated, which means that's anti-aging, anti-cancer, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative. The gene that activates stem cells to become awakened to go to damaged and aging tissue and repair them. The gene that actually repairs cells, the microtubules, the skeletal structures of the skulls, where many neuroscientists believe the seat of consciousness exists, was actually reconstructed just in 4 days. So imagine then if people practice this continuously. So then most people are relying on their outer world to change their inner world. But our work is showing that when you begin to change your inner world, not only does it change your biology, but it also should change your outer world. So then those genes that have become new behaviors, those genes that have become, that create new experiences, once the experiences are cooperative, more effective in a person's life, Nature says keep that gene signaled and start making better proteins. And the expression of proteins is the expression of life. So the side effect of that is a person all of a sudden, their diabetes changes, or their MS goes away, or their lupus changes, or all of a sudden they have a shift in their life and things begin to change as a result of it. And the only thing it takes is a little practice, like learning a new skill.
So let's talk about that skill, because one of the skills that you use heavily is the skill of meditation. And I'll say that, in all the years that I've worked with people, I can't even, if I had a penny for every time somebody said, well, I can't meditate, I would be probably a billionaire. So you talk about 4 different kinds of meditation, and you teach them all. Talk about what happens with people who think they can't meditate, and how do you get around that, and what are the ways in which you share meditation with your students?
Well, look, meditation, the actual translation of the symbol of that concept means to become familiar with. That's what it means. So if 95% of who you are by the time you're 35 years old is memorized behaviors and emotional reactions, beliefs, perceptions, and attitudes, then the first step is becoming conscious of your unconscious thoughts, becoming aware of your automatic habits and behaviors, and noticing and becoming familiar with your emotions and your emotional reactions, and become so conscious of them and so familiar with them that you never go unconscious again, to know thyself. Now, most people don't like to light a match in a dark place because it's uncomfortable, and that's what change is about. The moment you decide to change, get ready. You're going to feel uncomfortable because you're leaving the familiar and you're leaving the known. You're leaving the biology of the past. So then most people, when they step into that unknown, since the body has been conditioned to be the mind through habit, the body wants to stay in its familiar territory. So it starts sending signals back to the brain saying, start tomorrow, you'll never change, this is too hard, you got too much to do, you're too much like your mother. And that's the body influencing the mind. Now, if you respond to that thought as if it's true, that thought will lead to the same choice, which will lead to the same behavior, which will create the same experience and produce the same feeling. And you'll say, this feels right. No. That feels familiar. Going from the old self to the new self is the neurological, the biological, the chemical, the hormonal, genetic death of the old self. Now, that doesn't mean you should white knuckle it. It means then, what thoughts do you want to fire and wire in your brain and put your attention behind? What behaviors do you want to demonstrate in one day, one lifetime? And the act of closing your eyes and rehearsing those behaviors. When you're truly present, the brain doesn't know the difference between what's going on in your outer world and your inner world. That means that the thought that you're thinking literally becomes the experience, and you begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain. You're priming your brain to the future now. If you keep doing it over and over again, it'll begin to become more familiar, and the hardware will become a software program. And who knows? You may start thinking like a happy person. You may start acting in more unlimited ways because there's no mystery there. You installed the circuits. Now, here's the hard part. Can you teach your body emotionally what that future feels like before it's made manifest? Which means you can't wait for your success to feel empowered, or your wealth to feel abundant, or your new relationship to feel love, or your healing to feel whole. That's the old model of reality of cause and effect, waiting for something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. But the quantum model of reality is causing an effect, which means the moment you start feeling empowered, you're stepping towards your success. The moment you're generating worthiness and abundance, you're beginning to create your wealth. The moment you're in love with yourself and in love with life, you'll create an equal. The moment you start to feel whole in gratitude, your healing begins. And now that's causing an effect. And if you trade suffering and pain and victimization and unworthiness for joy and freedom and gratitude, and you keep cultivating those chemicals and emotional states, it'll begin to become familiar to you. So no mystery, it's just taking concepts that were written in a language of 5,000 or more years ago and bringing them into a contemporary way for people to understand. So then the whole purpose of meditation is to get beyond the analytical mind. And what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And in order for you to do that, you have to learn the difference between different brainwave states. And the more you understand what you're doing and why, the how gets easier. And with practice and information, knowledge is the precursor to experience. So then when the person starts understanding what they're doing, they can assign meaning to it. And if nothing's left of conjecture or superstition or dogma, then all of a sudden now they begin to understand that what they're doing. And then they start becoming more effective. So it turns out when you get beyond your analytical mind, you have to slow your brainwaves down, and now you're in the realm where those hardwired attitudes and habits and beliefs and perceptions and emotional reactions exist, because that's when the body has been conditioned to be that way. Now you can begin to make changes in the operating system. So teaching people that. Now, the last point about meditation is if the environment controls how we think and feel, say you have a boss or a coworker that you've had experiences with it, well, then you have a neurological network connected to that person. If you have certain experiences with that person, you also have certain emotions that you relate with them. And if you judge them or you're frustrated with them, the moment you see them and your senses plug you into the environment, it makes sense then that you start thinking in the past and you start feeling the familiar emotions of judgment, or you start feeling the emotions of frustration. Now your environment is controlling how you think and feel. But if you're really going to produce an effect, how you think and feel should start affecting your environment. So let's close our eyes and disconnect from the environment. Let's play some soft music in the background to reduce more sensory information. Sit your body down and don't get up and start doing the things you typically do. And if your body wants to get up and move, then every time you settle your body back down into the present moment, you're telling it it's no longer the mind, that you're the mind. And if you're not thinking about the predictable future or the familiar past, and you're laboring for the present moment, then to truly be in a meditation is when you get beyond your body, your environment, and time. And when you do that properly, that's the moment you become thought alone. And if you're going to heal your body by thought alone, if you're going to create some new future in your outer world by thought alone, then you have to become thought alone. And so then when you start demystifying the process, people realize that they already know how to do it. It's not something that we have to really learn. We're innately wired to be creators. We just have to make the time in our busy lives to be a creator.
And you talk about meditating while walking, meditating while lying down. What are the other ways that you can connect with your meditation?
Well, there's 4 types of meditation. There's a seated meditation, and everybody practices a seated meditation. But let's imagine that you connect during your seated meditation, and you get up, open your eyes, and you got a busy day, and all of a sudden you lose that energy, you lose that feeling, you lose your level of awareness because you run back into your programs. Well, I've been guilty of this, so let's practice standing up and connecting with your eyes closed. So let's start opening your heart again. Let's start feeling those elevated emotions. Let those emotions begin to drive your thoughts. Let's change your energy. Let's fall into the present moment, but let's do it standing up so you can practice in a different position. Then open your eyes and now take your body for a walk. And as you move into trance and you open your eyes and you start bringing up the memories of your future, and you start walking and changing your posture and changing how you breathe, and you start falling into a new state of being, and then stopping after a period of time, closing your eyes and recalibrating and getting familiar with that energy and getting familiar with those feelings and those thoughts, opening your eyes and doing that over and over again, it makes sense then, if you keep practicing that, it'll begin to become more familiar, become more of a habit. So who knows, you may walk from your car to your office like your unlimited self. You may start standing in line at the grocery store instead of judging the person for the food they're buying. You may actually just want to feel a different feeling and move into a different state. And all of a sudden, that becomes the person's new state of being. Now, when we do our lying down meditations, we do the lying down meditations because it's very natural for people's brainwaves to begin to slow down when they lay down. And we do a particular meditation where we catch people right between that delta falling asleep and theta, or between low-level alpha and low-level theta. We catch them half between awake and asleep. And that's where we catch them in that realm, is where they start to have profound mystical and lucid experiences. So there's an intention behind why we do all those things. And imagine 1,000 people or 1,500 people or 750 people on a beach or in a park or around a lake, and they're all moving as their new self. It's really, really quite an astounding visual image.
I can. Yeah, that's exciting. So I get excited about that vision, not just because I'm excited for each person that's making this huge transformation, but one of the things you talk about is how the energy in the room when you do this work with a group of people changes. And in my mind, I can imagine that when we're all attending to our own creative supernatural powers, that we're only adding to a growing consciousness of people who are able to do this in the world and who are consequently going to influence the manifestation of the world around us. So talk to me for just 1 minute about how does the energy change, and what are the measurable criteria that you use when you're looking at not just individual shifts and changes, but the changes of energy in the room?
Well, we once again, when people start to overcome themselves and they start to trade frustration and impatience and resentment for joy and gratitude and appreciation and care and kindness, energy starts to move in their body from different places. And the place that it typically lands when you start feeling those elevated emotions is your heart. Now, when you're feeling those survival emotions, your heart beats very, very arrhythmically. It beats out of order. But when you start feeling gratitude and care and appreciation, and you can sustain that state, all of a sudden the heart starts becoming more coherent. And like beating a big drum in a very specific rhythm, the sound waves that are created from that drum are just like energetic waves that come off the heart that produce a measurable magnetic field up to 2 to 3 meters wide. So this is science now. Now, once you have an energy being emanated from your heart, all energy is frequency, and all frequency carries information. So then if you allayed a thought or intention on that wave, you would begin to broadcast the whole new electromagnetic signature. Now, if you have 750 people in a room and everybody's doing that, and I'm coherent and you're coherent, and my waves start interfering with your waves, when those waves come together, they're going to summate. They're going to constructively interfere and create a bigger wave. Now, the bigger the wave, the higher the amplitude. The higher the amplitude, the higher the energy. And all of a sudden now, people start to move into this resonance. And if you say to the people that are doing this, there are 50 people in the front of the room with their eyes closed, send the intent that their lives be enriched, that their bodies be healed, that their dreams come true, that the mystical find them. And the people in the front of the room, all of a sudden, with their eyes closed, their hearts go into coherence at the exact same time, the exact same day, in the exact same meditation. You now know that there's a non-local quantum phenomena taking place. Doesn't happen as well with frustration or guilt or shame. It works faster and better with an elevated emotion. So then our students saw the research and said, well, hell, if we can do it in a room and it's a non-local phenomenon, let's do it for the world. So we created 4 peace-gathering projects, and there's scientific data, peer-reviewed studies, 23 peer-reviewed studies on the power of peace-gathering projects that reduce crime, that reduce violence, that increase economic growth when people come together with the right intentions. So then, wow, we decided to do it. We had 42,000 people participate in our last our global meditation. And we'll keep doing them because if we get good at this, what we're saying is we're influencing a person's autonomic nervous system by our own energy to feel love and to feel gratitude. And that starts creating a new community that's connected. One mind, just like a group of birds, a flock of birds that all turn in the same direction, or a school of fish that move as one mind. All of a sudden, we're no longer experiencing separation. We become an organism of individuals that want to care for one another, that want the best for one another, that want to give and support one another. And that's who we innately are when we're not threatened, when we're not angry, when we're not fearful, when we're not sad and feeling pain. That's our nature. So then I think that it's a good start for people, once they start seeing the research, to naturally begin to think what's possible.
That gives me chills. So you are switching some of the format for your trainings. Up until this point, people have had to go attend your workshops live. You now have a new format that you're going to be launching next year where people can learn some of this information online, and then, of course, go and attend your live workshops and trainings too, because I can imagine that what you learn at home is powerful and lays the foundation, but there's something pretty incredible about being in a room full of people who are aligned with an intention to become supernatural. Dr. Dispenza's new book, Becoming Supernatural, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your bookstore. I will personally say I have already bought 5 copies for my kids for Christmas. And I actually mailed one yesterday on an emergency basis to one of my kids. I said, we're not waiting until December. You're getting it now. Dr. Joe's website is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I'm going to spell that for you guys. It's DrJoeDispenza.com. And when you go there, you can find more information about new courses and trainings. He's got an extensive collection of meditations. I downloaded them all this morning. Is there any last words or comments or things you want to share with us, Dr. Joe, before you go?
Gosh, try it out. Take a little bit of time out of your busy day and really start to experiment with your life. After all these years of teaching this stuff and witnessing transformation, I can tell you that nobody changes until they change their energy. But when you do change your energy, you change your life. And so how you broadcast information, your body's always sending and receiving information, is when you begin to change the way you think and feel. And if you can sustain that state, independent of the conditions in your environment, independent of the habits and emotions in your body, and independent of time, get ready, because you're going to start seeing things start to happen in your life. And be the scientist in your life. When you start seeing those effects, then go back and do it again and see if it produces more effects. And make it fun. Don't make it torturous. Begin to really see how powerful you really are. And when those synchronicities and serendipities happen and you feel surprised and joyful and excited, use that energy to create again. And if we keep doing that, we just keep moving from being a victim of our life to being a creator of our life. And I can tell you, the common people around the world are doing the uncommon because they're investing in themselves. And when you invest in yourself, you invest in your future.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Joe Dispenza, for joining us today for Quantum Conversations. It has been exciting and enlightening, and I'm going to have a future self with a bottle of wine and 2 hours of more in-depth conversation somewhere in the future. So Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for doing this, too. Thank you.
The stories you tell yourself about your life, the memories you hold that define the story of who you think you are, the beliefs that you have that root you in this physical world may have, at one point, protected you and kept you safe, but they also may have been limiting what you've been able to create in your life so far. We are hardwired for health, joy, abundance, love, deep meaning, and a deep connection with spirit, and imbued with a tremendous capacity to manifest these energies in material form beyond what many of us allow ourselves to believe or even achieve. If we are truly powerful beyond our belief, and our bodies are actually hardwired to harness a creative power that allows us to be supernatural each and every day, we have to transcend the story of who we think we are. We have to let go of the past and all the limiting stories we tell ourselves about what is possible and what isn't. The power of science and empirical data is that it builds a bridge of understanding that allows us to transcend the doubt and suspicion of ourselves and others that we are so deeply conditioned by. If we can prove with data that we are supernatural, then it makes it easier for us to be open to the possibility. And whenever we open to possibility, we increase the chance it becomes more scientifically probable that we will become more supernatural. When I think of a room full of people who are able to transcend the limitations of possibility and open up their hearts to the pure awareness and consciousness of a sustainable and peaceful world, a room full of people who are calling that world forth with their hearts, I am inspired and hopeful about where we're headed. Take some time today and imagine yourself walking in that world of sustainable peace. If you'd like to learn more about the story of who you truly are, please visit our Quantum Conversations Facebook page. While you're there, you can get your free human design chart and learn how to create more coherence in the story of your life. Today, at the end of this quantum conversation in my mind's eye, I see us all united together, embracing the value of life and each and every one of us individually. This is the future I'm walking towards today. I hope you'll join me. I'm Karen Curry Parker. Thank you for being with me for this week's Quantum Conversation.
Thanks for listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. For more information, visit joyfulmission.com.